parents sold my belongings without asking, claiming they needed the cash. It's just junk you don't need, they said. Here's how I made them regret it. Hey everyone, before we dive in, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. I never thought I'd be posting here, but I genuinely need perspective on this situation because I feel like I'm losing my mind. What started as a weird gut feeling turned into something I still can't quite process. I just got back from a 2-week work trip yesterday evening. Everything seemed normal at first. My parents greeted me like usual, asked about my trip, and Mom even made my favorite lasagna. But something felt off when I went up to my old room. You know that feeling when something's different, but you can't immediately put your finger on it? I've been living with my parents while saving up for a house. Yeah, I know, and I keep most of my stuff in my childhood bedroom. The room looked emptier somehow. It took me a few minutes of looking around to realize what was missing. My entire gaming collection that I'd built up since I was 12 was gone. We're talking rare consoles, limited editions, games I'd spent years tracking down. The shelf where I displayed everything was completely bare. At first, I thought maybe my mom had cleaned and moved things around. She does that sometimes. So I checked the closet, under the bed, the basement. Nothing. My heart started racing when I couldn't find any of it. The whole collection was worth well over $155,000, conservatively speaking. Some of those items were literally irreplaceable. I went downstairs to ask my parents about it, trying to stay calm. Their reaction is what really threw me. Mom barely looked up from her phone, and Dad just shrugged and said, "Oh, we sold all that old junk. You never use it anyway, and we needed the money." Just like that. Like they were telling me they'd thrown out old newspapers. When I explained how valuable those items were, Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Come on, no one pays that much for old games. We got a few hundred for the lot, and you should be grateful we're letting you live here rent-free at your age." I pressed further, asking when they sold everything and why they didn't even tell me. Mom finally looked up and said, "We didn't think you'd mind. It's not like you were playing with them anymore. Besides, we had some unexpected expenses come up." Something in their cavalier attitude made me dig deeper. I asked what expenses they were talking about, and they got weirdly defensive. Dad snapped that it wasn't my business, and Mom suddenly needed to check on something in the kitchen. I went back to my room and started really looking around. That's when I noticed other things missing too. My old coin collection from my grandfather, gone. The vintage baseball cards I'd been saving since middle school, vanished. Even my academic awards and certificates from high school were missing from the walls. The more I looked, the more I found missing, or rather, not found. I started taking photos and making a list of everything I could remember being there before my trip. My girlfriend came over to help, since she'd been here plenty of times and could remember where things used to be. But here's the kicker. While we were documenting everything, she was scrolling through local marketplace listings on her phone and found photos of my stuff being sold just last week. Multiple listings, different items, all posted under some random account. The photos were definitely taken in our garage. I recognized the shelving in the background. They didn't just sell my things. They deliberately waited until I was away on my work trip to do it. The timestamps on the listings prove it. They started posting items for sale literally the day after I left. I'm sitting here looking at photos of my childhood treasures being sold off for a fraction of their value, and I feel sick. These weren't just old games. They were memories. That limited edition console? I saved up for 2 years to buy it. The rare games? Some were gifts from my brother before he moved abroad. My grandfather's coins were the last thing he gave me before he passed away. I don't know what to do. My parents keep acting like I'm overreacting, but they essentially stole thousands of dollars worth of my property and sold it behind my back. When I brought up the marketplace listings, they just got angry and said I should be more understanding of their situation, whatever that means. I need to figure out my next steps. I've already started moving my remaining belongings to my girlfriend's place, but I can't help wondering what else they might have sold that I haven't noticed yet. More importantly, I need to understand why they really did this. Those unexpected expenses they mentioned? Something about that feels really off. I guess I'm posting this because I need to know if I'm crazy for feeling this betrayed, and maybe I need advice on what to do next. Has anyone else dealt with something like this? Should I be pursuing legal options? Try to track down the buyers? I honestly never thought I'd be in this position. Update. First, I want to thank everyone who responded to my last post. Your support and advice really helped me get my thoughts together and figure out my next steps. A lot has happened in the past few days, and honestly, each answer I found has just led to more questions. I started by documenting everything I could remember owning. My girlfriend helped me go through old photos on my phone where you could see my room in the background. It's amazing how many things you forget you have until they're gone. We made a comprehensive list, and I started reaching out to the marketplace buyers. Some of them actually responded. One guy who bought my limited edition console was super apologetic when I explained the situation. He said my mom seemed really nervous during the sale, kept looking over her shoulder, and practically pushed him out the door once he handed over the cash. He said something felt off, but the price was too good to pass up. That's when I realized they must have sold everything for way below market value, probably just to get quick cash. Here's where things get weird. My brother came over yesterday after I told him what happened. He had this look on his face like he wasn't surprised at all. We went for a drive, and he finally told me what he's known for months. Our parents have been struggling with gambling. Not just casual betting, but serious losses. He'd noticed money disappearing from their joint account with Mom. He still shares one with them for emergencies. But they kept making excuses about home repairs or medical bills. They've been different lately, he said. Dad's been taking these mysterious trips to the city, and Mom's been covering for him. I thought they'd figure it out themselves. He trailed off, looking guilty. I should have told you sooner. I spent the next day digging deeper. Found out they've been selling other things too. Mom's jewelry, Dad's golf clubs, even the antique furniture from Grandma. But here's the real kicker. I checked my bank statements carefully and found 2 attempted transfers from my account to theirs that got flagged for verification. They must have tried using my savings login from when I used their computer last month. When I confronted them about the attempted transfers, it exploded. Not angry explosive, but this weird, desperate kind of explosion. You don't understand what it's like, he kept saying. We just needed a little more to make it right. One good bet, and we could have replaced everything. Mom just sat there staring at her hands. When I pressed about the gambling, she finally looked up and said, "We didn't want you to know. We thought we could fix it before anyone found out." Her voice was so small, so unlike her usual confident self. "Your father just needed one more chance." I reached out to our family friend who practices law. She confirmed what many of you suggested. What they did was definitely illegal, regardless of me living in their house. She's helping me put together a formal demand letter, but she also suggested trying to handle this within the family first, given the circumstances. The hardest part? Finding out they sold my grandfather's watch. It wasn't even with my stuff. They took it from the safe deposit box where I'd been keeping it. The one thing I specifically protected, and they still found a way to get to it. That was the moment something shifted in me. This wasn't just about the money anymore. I've started staying at my girlfriend's place. The few times I've gone back to get more of my things, the house feels different. Emptier somehow. Not just because of the missing items, but there's this heaviness in the air. Mom keeps trying to pretend everything's normal, asking if I want dinner, telling me about her garden plans. Dad barely looks at me. My brother thinks we need to do an intervention. He's probably right. But I'm still trying to process everything. The people who taught me about responsibility and trust are the ones who betrayed both. Every time I think about another missing item, I remember the story behind it, the moment it became important to me. And it hits all over again. I've managed to track down a few more buyers through Marketplace. Going to meet one tomorrow who has my childhood card collection. He seemed understanding on the phone, but we'll see. The whole thing is surreal, having to basically buy back my own belongings. Just got a text from Mom asking for one more chance to make things right. The thing is, I found bank statements showing cash withdrawals going back months. This wasn't a one-time desperate act. It was a pattern they hid until they ran out of their own things to sell. I need to figure out how to protect my remaining assets while somehow helping my parents. Never thought I'd have to do both at the same time. Update 2. Things have escalated quickly since my last update. I'm writing this from my girlfriend's apartment, where I've been staying full-time now. The past week has been a blur of legal consultations, family drama, and some unexpected discoveries that changed everything. Remember that family friend who practices law? She helped me draft a formal demand letter. But before we sent it, something interesting happened. My brother found Dad's laptop open one night while visiting them. He wasn't snooping. Dad had literally left open a spreadsheet of all their gambling debts. We're talking about way more money than I initially thought. The spreadsheet showed regular trips to 3 different casinos, online betting accounts, and even loans from people we've never heard of. When my brother told me about this, I felt this weird sense of relief. Not because of the amounts, those were terrifying, but because finally, everything made sense. The mysterious trips, the defensive behavior, the desperate need for quick cash. It was all there, in black and white. I decided to confront them one last time before going the legal route. My brother and girlfriend came with me for support. The conversation started calm enough, with Mom making coffee like it was just another family visit. But when I mentioned the spreadsheet, Dad's face just changed. He tried to grab his laptop, but knocked over his coffee instead. As he was wiping up the spill, his hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold the paper towels. "You don't understand," he kept saying. "We almost had it all back last month. One more beat it and we could have fixed everything." Mom just sat there, nodding along like this made perfect sense. That's when I realized how deep this went. They were both completely lost in this fantasy of the big win that would solve everything. The really bizarre part? While we were talking, their phones kept buzzing with notifications. Dad kept glancing at his phone, his leg bouncing under the table. Later, my brother checked. They were notifications from betting apps. They were literally getting gambling alerts during our intervention about their gambling problem. I had my friend send the formal demand letter the next day. It detailed everything they took, with approximate values and proof of ownership, where I had it. The letter arrived while I was moving out the last of my things. Mom tried to act like nothing was wrong, offering to help pack, asking if I wanted to take some of her lasagna home. Meanwhile, Dad was in his study, making calls in a hushed voice. The next day, things got weird, really weird. Mom showed up at my girlfriend's apartment unannounced, crying about how they could fix everything if I just gave them a little more time. She brought a box of my old school awards she'd found in the attic, the same ones they'd sold weeks ago. When I pointed this out, she broke down and admitted they'd been trying to buy back some of my things in secret. That's when she told me about Dad's system. Apparently, he'd convinced himself he'd figured out a foolproof betting strategy. They'd been using the money from selling my things to fund this system, believing they'd be able to buy everything back, and more, once it paid off. The delusion ran so deep that they'd even made a list of replacement items they planned to buy me, including upgraded versions of everything they'd sold. My brother's been amazing through all this. He set up a meeting with an addiction counselor who specializes in gambling. The counselor explained that this behavior, selling family treasures, the magical thinking about winning it all back, it's all textbook gambling addiction. Knowing this helps, but it doesn't make it hurt less. Yesterday I got a call from one of the casino managers. Turns out my parents had put themselves on the voluntary exclusion list just hours after receiving the demand letter. The manager was calling because Dad had tried to get in anyway, claiming he'd left something important inside. The legal process is moving forward now. My friend helped me file the necessary paperwork, and we're working on recovering what we can. Some buyers have actually reached out after seeing my posts in local collecting groups, offering to return items they bought. One guy even refused to take payment, saying he has kids of his own and couldn't imagine doing this to them. But here's the thing that's keeping me up at night. While going through the paperwork, we discovered Mom had recently taken out a second mortgage on the house. The house I grew up in, that they've owned for 30 years, is now leveraged to the hilt. They didn't just gamble away my things. They gambled away their own future. I'm meeting with a family counselor tomorrow to discuss next steps. Dad's still resistant, but Mom's finally showing signs of accepting help. She called me last night, not to beg or make excuses, but to ask about addiction support groups in our area. It's a small step, but maybe it's a start. Just got a text from my brother. Apparently Dad's trying to sell their car now. Says they need it for one last opportunity. We're running out of time to prevent them from losing everything. I guess sometimes taking legal action against your own parents is the only way to save them from themselves. Final update. It's been 3 months since my last update, and the situation has resolved in ways I never expected. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you plan. It's what life hands you when you stop trying to control everything. First, the legal stuff worked out, but not how we thought it would. The demand letter got my parents' attention, but what really changed things was an anonymous tip to their creditors. I didn't send it. Turns out Dad had been taking loans from some pretty sketchy people, and someone talked. The ensuing chaos actually worked in our favor. When their unofficial creditors started calling, my parents finally realized they couldn't hide anymore. Mom broke down and showed me their real financial records. It wasn't just my stuff they'd sold. They'd been systematically liquidating everything of value for months. But here's where it gets interesting. They'd been keeping detailed records of every sale, every bet, every loss. Not because they were being responsible, but because Dad was convinced his system would work if he just tracked everything perfectly. I took those records to my brother and our family friend who's been helping legally. We discovered something that changed everything. Dad had been using Mom's identity to take out loans without her knowledge. She'd signed papers thinking they were for house repairs. When we showed her the evidence, something in her just snapped. Remember how I mentioned they'd mortgaged the house? Well, Mom hadn't actually signed those papers. Dad had forged her signature. That's when I decided to take action, but not in the way everyone expected. Instead of pressing charges immediately, I worked with Mom to document everything. Every forged signature, every unauthorized loan, every stolen item. Then I did something that still gives me mixed feelings. I used Dad's own obsessive record keeping against him. He documented every bet, every loss, every system adjustment in that spreadsheet. I compiled it all and sent copies to every family member, every friend, and every legitimate creditor. The family reaction was nuclear. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people who'd been lending them money thinking it was for medical bills or home repairs, all found out the truth at once. Dad's carefully constructed house of cards collapsed in a single day. But the real revenge? I helped Mom file for divorce. She'd been trapped, manipulated, and used as a pawn in Dad's gambling addiction. When she realized the extent of his forgeries and unauthorized loans in her name, she finally saw the whole picture. I made sure she had copies of everything, every document, every forged signature, every hidden account. Dad's reaction when the divorce papers arrived was almost pitiful. He showed up at my girlfriend's apartment, not angry but desperate, trying to convince me that Mom was making a mistake, that his system was finally about to pay off. That's when I played my final card. I showed him the video of him forging Mom's signature on the second mortgage, captured by the home security camera he'd forgotten about. The look on his face when he realized his own surveillance system had caught him, that was worth more than any of the things he'd sold. Here's where it gets even better. Remember those rare games and consoles he sold for pennies on the dollar? Turns out some of the buyers were actually decent people. After seeing my posts in collecting groups, they started reaching out, not to return things, but to share screenshots of their conversations with Dad where he'd practically given things away in his desperation for quick cash. Those screenshots became evidence in both the divorce and criminal proceedings. Mom moved in with my aunt and started therapy. She's also working with a financial advisor to untangle the mess Dad made of their accounts. The house will probably be sold to pay debts, but at least she's protected now that we've documented which loans were legitimate and which weren't. Dad, he's facing consequences from multiple directions. The legitimate banks are pursuing fraud charges. His sketchy creditors are, well, being sketchy creditors. He's living in a cheap motel, still convinced his next bet will turn everything around. Last week, he tried to convince my brother to invest in his system. My brother just sent him a link to Gamblers Anonymous. As for me, I got most of my stuff back, one way or another. Some buyers returned things outright, some I bought back. The things I couldn't recover, they're just things. What matters is that Mom is safe, Dad is facing consequences, and the truth is out. My girlfriend thinks I should feel bad about essentially destroying Dad's life. But here's the thing, I didn't destroy anything. I just exposed what he was doing. He destroyed his own life, piece by piece, bet by bet. All I did was stop helping him hide it. The family is divided. Some think I went too far, others wish I'd done it sooner. But watching Mom rebuild her life, seeing her smile again, worth it. She told me yesterday that for the first time in years, she slept through the night without worrying about money. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making sure the truth can't be hidden anymore. Dad's still out there, still betting, still convinced his system will work, but now he's doing it alone, without using family members as unwitting accomplices. Got a message from him this morning. He says he misses his family and wants to make amends. Maybe someday. But for now, I'm focused on helping Mom rebuild her life and making sure this never happens to our family again. Final note, all those detailed records Dad kept, they're now being used in a case study for gambling addiction counselors. Turns out his obsessive documentation of his system is helping other families spot the warning signs before it goes this far. I guess that's its own kind of justice.